The red and blue lights didn't just flash. They smeared themselves across my front porch, sliding up the white railings like they were alive, like panic had figured out how to drive a cruiser. Deputies were yelling, voices sharp and stacked over one another, hands half raised as they ordered someone to stand down. And for half a heartbeat, just one, I genuinely thought they meant me. I stood frozen behind the glass, barefoot on cold hardwood, my heart hammering the same way it used to when the alarm bell rang at the firehouse. Then I saw her, Vivian Hale, right there on my porch. My neighbor, my personal migraine, the self-declared president of something she called a community association. She was pounding on my door like she meant to bring the whole house down. "That's him," she screamed, stabbing the air with her finger like she finally caught a fugitive. "That man stole my house." My house. The one she was talking about was the place my Uncle Frank left me when he passed. The same house I rebuilt plank by plank after 34 years of running calls in Chicago. Fires, wrecks, overdoses, the kind of things you don't bring up over dinner. Watching her unravel on my porch, one thought surfaced, calm and unreal. So this is happening. If you told me 10 years ago that retiring to a quiet valley would include squad cars, forged paperwork, and a grown woman convinced a law bends for her Facebook group, I would have laughed in your face. But that morning, there was nothing funny about it. I moved to Willow Ridge after 34 years with the CFD. Sirens had been the background music of my life. Smoke in my lungs, adrenaline in my blood, grief stitched into every shift. When I finally hung up the gear, all I wanted was silence. Real silence. The kind where you hear wind moving through cottonwoods. Where nights don't glow orange from streetlights. Where your shoulders finally drop without you forcing them to. Uncle Frank's farmhouse checked every box. Built in the 1950s. Thick beams. A wide porch. Enough land that the nearest neighbor felt hypothetical. I spent my first year fixing fences, planting a small orchard, repairing the porch with my own hands. For the first time in decades, I slept straight through the night. It felt like recovery. And for a while it was, peace rarely explodes. It erodes. It started the day a rusted RV rattled onto the empty lot next door, coughing dust like it had something to prove. Out stepped Vivian, bleached hair stiff with spray, oversized sunglasses despite the clouds. Her mouth already twisted into a scowl like the universe had personally wronged her. She hauled out folding chairs, a kiddie pool, and a speaker blasting a country remix that sounded engineered to punish strangers. 2 kids spilled out behind her, shrieking, tearing across the dirt without brakes. Still I tried. Old instincts die slow. I waved. I said hello. I even brought apples from my trees. She smiled, but not the kind that warms you, the kind that tightens. "So," she said, peering past me and counting windows, "how many rooms you got in that house?" "4," I told her. "Just me?" Her eyes went wide like I confessed to tax fraud. That was the first fracture. The second came when she casually announced she was the president of the Willow Ridge Community Association. Something I'd never heard of. "Technically," she said, stretching the word thin, "our association oversees the entire valley. Your land might fall under our jurisdiction." She said jurisdiction like she was sheriff, judge, and executioner rolled into one. I explained politely that my parcel had been privately recorded decades before any HOA paperwork, if such paperwork even existed. She didn't argue. She just stored away. Over the following weeks, Vivian became my shadow. Anytime I stepped outside, mowing, painting, trimming trees, there she was, arms crossed, clipboard ready. "That paint color isn't approved. Grass is 3 inches too tall. You can't have compost visible from the road." We lived in a valley with more deer than people. I ignored her, so she escalated. Notices appeared taped to my mailbox. Courtesy warnings, citations, fines, all printed on flimsy letterhead with a logo that looked slapped together in 10 minutes. It would have been funny if she hadn't been dead serious. Then one Saturday morning, she walked straight onto my porch like she owned it, folder tucked under her arm, that same tight smile back on her face. "Listen," she said sweetly, "your house is too big for one person. I've got 2 kids who need space. How about we trade?" I laughed, I thought she was kidding. She didn't laugh back. "You don't deserve a place like this," she snapped, the sweetness evaporating. "You're selfish." That's when it clicked. This wasn't about rules, property values, or community. It was entitlement. After that, things turned ugly. Her kids tore through my garden. Someone stripped bark from my peach tree. When I told them to stop, Vivian stormed out screaming that her children could play wherever they wanted. So I started documenting everything: dates, times, incidents. Old firefighter habit. You learn quickly that if it's not written down, it didn't happen. Good thing I did. One afternoon, I came home from fishing to find my garage tagged in red spray paint. Threats. Promises. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. Neighbors later told me she'd been spreading the story that I'd promised the house out of generosity, then backed out. The next day, a typed agreement appeared in my mailbox claiming I'd gifted her the property. Misspellings. Fake notarization. A joke. If it hadn't been terrifying. That's when it sank in. This wasn't harassment anymore. It was a setup. Standing there with that fake document in my hands, I had no idea how far she was willing to go or how ugly this was about to become. Now slow down here, because this is where people panic, get confused, and make terrible choices. An HOA, or anything calling itself one, doesn't gain authority just because someone says it loudly, confidently, or often. Real homeowner associations are created through recorded covenants tied directly to a deed. If it's not in your title paperwork, it doesn't magically attach later because a neighbor wants it to. Legally, what Vivian was doing has a name: paper terrorism. Drowning someone in fake notices, fines, and official-looking documents is designed to exhaust them. The goal isn't winning a case. It's pressure. Psychologically, it's a classic dominance move. Reframe reality until the target starts questioning their own. She wasn't enforcing rules. She was inventing authority and hoping I'd cave just to make the noise stop. People like this depend on three things: intimidation, isolation, and your lack of knowledge. That's why documentation matters. Dates, cameras, receipts. When emotions spiral, facts are the last thing that holds weight. The moment someone jumps from complaints to forged documents and public lies, you're no longer in a neighbor dispute. You're in escalation. And escalation ends only two ways: someone backs down or someone gets caught. And Vivian wasn't finished. I took the fake agreement straight to a local attorney, Claire Donovan. Small office, sharp eyes, the kind of calm that comes from seeing this nonsense before. She didn't even reach the bottom of the page before she laughed. Not amused, more like someone spotting a kid wearing a plastic badge. "This isn't even remotely legitimate," she said, sliding the paper back across her desk. "But people who try this don't just stop. They push harder. From here on out, you save everything." So I did. Trail cameras went up along the tree line. Motion lights snapped on with every shift of shadow. A thick binder started filling with screenshots, letters, timestamps. At first, it felt absurd, like I was gearing up for a battle I never wanted to fight. But deep down, I knew Claire was right. Vivian wasn't finished. A week later, she made it public. She started live streaming from the edge of my property. Phone held overhead, voice quivering in that staged, breathless way. "I'm standing outside my home," she told Facebook, "and there's an armed, aggressive man refusing a safety inspection." HOA safety inspection, whatever that was supposed to mean. I watched the comments later. Dangerous, unstable, a menace. People who'd never met me, never been to Willow Ridge, suddenly convinced they knew exactly who I was. That part cut the deepest. Not fear, humiliation. I confronted her once. Just once. "Vivian," I said, staying firmly on my side of the boundary, "get off my land." She swung the camera toward me, eyes bright. "See? You all heard that. He's threatening me." That's when it clicked. This wasn't about the house anymore. It was about control, about shaping the story, about winning in front of an audience. The letters kept coming. Cars she claimed were HOA patrol crews passed my place slowly, like they were scoping it out. Notes appeared under my door. "You don't belong here. The association will take this property." I stopped sleeping. I started asking myself a question I hated. Is it worth it? Not because I was afraid, but because I was exhausted. the kind of tire that settles deep in your chest and makes even standing your ground feel heavy. Then came the first real fracture in her armor. One afternoon while I was out, my trail cam sent an alert. Vivian, clear as day, walking into my orchard, clipboard in hand, snapping photos. Trespassing. No spin. No gray area. I took the footage straight to the sheriff's office. Deputy Mark Reyes watched it twice, his jaw tightening. He paid her a visit. She got a formal warning, a trespass notice. I thought, stupidly, that it might slow her down. The next morning, 2 men in orange vests were pounding a lien notice into my yard, claiming I owed over $1,300 in unpaid HOA dues. There is no HOA here, I snapped. Lady said there was. One of them muttered, already pulling the sign back out like he wanted nothing to do with it. That was the moment I stopped seeing her as delusional and started seeing her as dangerous. Claire drafted a cease and desist citing state, HOA statutes. Vivian ripped it up in her driveway and tossed the pieces like confetti. Then came the night that changed everything. It was just after 4 a.m. when my phone exploded with alerts. Motion detected. I opened the feed and felt my blood turn to ice. Vivian in the dark, whispering. A second figure stepped into frame. They started moving toward my porch. I called 911. Deputies arrived fast. Red and blue lights cut through the night. They caught her mid-step, screaming, flailing, insisting she had every right to be there. "You can't stop me," she shrieked as they dragged her back. "The truth will come out." She was right about one thing. The truth did come out, just not her version. A week later, county surveyors showed up. Turns out Vivian's RV wasn't even on her own land. She'd been squatting on property owned by a rancher named Henry Caldwell. The man owned half of Eastern Ridge and had zero patience for nonsense. Henry showed up in a wide-brimmed hat, knocked on her door, and said calmly, "Ma'am, you have 30 days to vacate." She laughed in his face. "I'm the association president. This is community land." Henry didn't even blink. "My deed's older than your association." That's when the panic set in. Complaints started flying everywhere. Zoning, environmental complaints, county clerk filings, every single one dismissed. The court ordered her off the land. That's when she completely unraveled. She cornered me in the courthouse parking lot, screaming about conspiracies, betrayal, sabotage, accusing me of orchestrating everything. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, but she still had one last move left. One quiet Tuesday morning, 3 patrol cars rolled into my yard, lights flashing, deputies stepping out with hands hovering near their holsters. "Sir," one of them said carefully, "we receive a report of a squatter refusing to vacate this residence. Are you armed?" "A squatter?" Vivian stood behind them, practically vibrating with excitement. "That's him," she said. "He broke in weeks ago." Deputy Reyes was there. Thank God. I handed him my deed, tax records, utility bills, everything. He looked it over, then turned to Vivian. "Ma'am, do you have proof this home belongs to you?" "I have a letter," she said weakly. "A letter," he repeated slowly, "is not a deed." He warned her for misuse of emergency services and told her the next call like that would come with charges. She vanished for a week. Then her friend Carla stepped in. Suddenly, there was an interim association president. New letters, new violations, something called visual impact jurisdiction, completely fabricated. One night, Carla and 2 so-called volunteers showed up at 2 a.m. with flashlights, inspecting my fence. The cameras caught everything. Reyes showed up again, cited them for trespassing, and looked Carla dead in the eye. "Step on this property again," he said, "and I'll arrest you myself." That should have been the end of it. Instead, the association filed a lawsuit against me. Defamation. Obstruction of community governance. We went to court. Vivian and Carla sat across the aisle, smug and theatrical. When asked for evidence, Vivian launched into a rambling speech about spiritual inheritance and shared ownership. The judge blinked, slowly. That is not how property law works. Claire dropped our binder onto the table. Police reports, forged documents, fake filings, video footage, 911 call logs. The case was dismissed immediately. Our countersuit was approved, damages awarded, restraining orders issued, permanent bans on contacting me or my property. The association dissolved within weeks. Vivian moved counties. And when it was finally over, I didn't celebrate. I walked back to my fence line, looked out over the valley, felt the wind move clean across the grass. And for the first time in more than a year, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. When everything finally went quiet, I didn't feel triumphant. There was no toast, no fist pump, no dramatic walk into the sunset. I just stood there with my hands in my pockets, staring at land that had never actually changed. Only the noise around it had. That's the strange thing about conflict like this. It doesn't announce itself as a battle. It shows up as inconvenience, as irritation, as something you promise yourself you'll deal with later. And by the time you understand what's happening, you're already exhausted. Entitlement doesn't look dangerous at first. It looks confident, organized, official. It wears clipboards and letterhead. It speaks in firm tones and uses words like jurisdiction and compliance because those words make people hesitate, and hesitation is the opening. Legally speaking, most HOA nightmares don't begin with real authority. They start with assumed authority. Someone decides they're in charge and bets you won't check, that you'll be too polite, too busy, or too unsure to push back. The system only functions when people don't understand how it actually works. That's why calm matters more than courage. I've run into burning buildings. I've stood in places where panic gets people killed. And this wasn't about bravery. It was about patience, about understanding that the law moves slowly, but it moves in straight lines. People like Vivian move fast, but in circles. There's a psychological trap in all of this too. When someone repeats something loudly, publicly, relentlessly, you start doubting yourself. You wonder if maybe you miss something, if maybe it's easy to give in, if maybe peace is worth the price. That's the moment they're waiting for. What saved me wasn't strength. It was paperwork. Documentation isn't dramatic. Cameras aren't heroic. Receipts don't sound exciting until they are. Because when emotion drains out a situation, all that remains is evidence. And evidence doesn't care who shouts the loudest. If you're dealing with something like this, here's what nobody says out loud. You're allowed to protect your peace without surrendering your rights. You don't owe politeness to manipulation. You don't owe silence to intimidation. And you absolutely don't owe your property to someone else's idea of fairness. This is also a story about community. Real community doesn't operate through threats. It doesn't weaponize rules or turn neighbors into enemies. And when someone claims they're acting for the good of everyone, but leaves behind only fear and division, that tells you everything you need to know. I stayed, not because I won, but because I didn't lose myself trying to keep the peace. And I'll leave you with this, because I'm curious how many of you have lived some version of it. Have you ever dealt with someone who invented authority out of thin air? Someone who tried to pressure you into giving up something that was legally, undeniably yours? Did you fight back, or did you walk away? Drop your story in the comments. I read them, all of them, because if this whole ordeal taught me anything, it's that silence is where people like that thrive. Shared stories, that's where they lose their power. In the end, justice doesn't need to shout. It just needs time.